Hi everyone. So today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to be talking about why you should read a certain series or maybe why you shouldn't. But I'm going to be talking about the Books of Babel series. And I read these last year, so it's been a little bit. It's not exactly fresh in my mind, but surprisingly, I remember them really well. And that alone up to the rating in my mind of these books because as long as I can still remember the story and it's so unique and different that I think I'm enjoying it more looking back and thinking about it. So I wanted to bring it up because it's not a series that I see a lot. And I just wanted to, put out some of maybe the pros and cons, maybe a little bit about what it's about, maybe see if you might want to read it. But I will say these are probably just some of the reasons why I think maybe you should read it and go through a little bit of that. Now, this is a 4-book series, so it's not too bad. But the first one is Senlin Ascends, and I just don't have the physical one of the first book. I read them all on the Kindle, but I did buy the first book. The next one is Arms of the Sphinx, and then The Hod King, and then The Fall of Babel. So there's 4 books. The last one I think is a little thicker. And I would have to say probably my favorite book, probably 2, Arm of the Sphinx, or even 3, The Hod King. I will say this first book, I wasn't sure if I liked it or not. I was a little iffy. And it's funny, looking back, I was looking at my Goodreads reviews and I wasn't too in-depth in my reviews. But for the most part, I rated the books maybe between a 3.5 and a 4 for all of them, which isn't that high. I tend to rate books higher just because if I enjoyed it, entertained me, I pretty much automatically put it like a 4-star. I don't like rating things too low because if I enjoyed it, I enjoyed it. And it's hard for me to have some type of basis for that. I don't really care for the star system. I wish it was more probably out of a 10 instead of 5. 5 just doesn't seem enough. Okay, I'm getting off on a tangent. But anyways, looking back, I was a little surprised about how low the reviews are that I put. Just because looking back, I think I enjoyed this more than I thought. I know that sounds odd, but it's like now that I've thought about the books again and I'm thinking about the story, I'm like, you know what, that was actually really good and it was unique and different. So I feel like if I maybe would have might reread them, I'd probably like them a little more. Now I will say the last book, that one was rough for me. And if you look at other reviews too, they're not great. There's some that are really high and then there's some that are just like, this is the worst book ever. You get those extremes. I was probably towards the middle. The ending wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't exactly a happy ending. It wasn't a bad ending either. I'm telling you this because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm also telling you this to go in with the expectations that the ending might not be what you're looking for. Some people really did like it and they thought it fit, whereas it might, I guess if you think about the characters, it's kind of is fitting, but realistically, you're like, this isn't what I wanted, like even if it is more of a realistic type ending based off of what has happened throughout the other books, you're kind of like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But then you're also like, this is a fantasy book. Like, I kind of want a better ending than that. I don't know. And then there was a lot of confusing things that kind of happened in the 4th book that was, I was looking at the, summaries of it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot that happened. And it was weird because when I was reading it, it wasn't making much sense. So there was just a lot of things happening in book 4 that just seemed, it didn't fit. And I just wasn't too happy with it. And then the book, like I said, the book was thicker. And they kept doing flashbacks between the characters. So you get multiple characters' point of views throughout this series. So Senlin Ascends is mainly just all about Senlin, which is good. I'm glad it sticks with him. But the other books, you start to get more point of views in there. And then by the 4th book, you're getting a lot of point of views. And it started going to each character and doing like these flashbacks. And sometimes I like flashbacks, but it was getting a little excessive. And I did put that in my Goodreads review. So I did put that in there and I remember that. And I'm like, oh yeah, you kind of get tired of that after a while. So especially by the 4th book, it's like, I already know the character by now. I don't need all these flashbacks. I got tired of it. I felt like the book could have been shorter, but then I also felt like it needed so much more. So it needed more of what I thought it needed and less of what it actually did. But going through the series itself, so starting off with Sunless Sentence, it follows this main character, Thomas Senlin, Senlin's his last name, and his new wife, Mariah. I think I'm guessing that's how it's going to be said. But it's following the two of them, and they're traveling essentially for their honeymoon to this Tower of Babel. And it's not like the biblical times Tower of Babel. This is something different. I kept wanting to picture that and draw analogies between it, but it's not there. It's not the same thing. So go in this with something new. So don't have that in mind. I mean, maybe you could draw some analogies, but I wasn't really seeing it. So they are traveling there because it's kind of this, it seems like a place that everyone wants to be, but reading the book, I don't know why. I don't know why anyone would want to be there. So they travel there, and in the front of the tower is almost like this market area. They're selling all this stuff. And so they're going there, they're, looking around. Well, he turns around for a little bit, and all of a sudden his new wife, Mariah, has just disappeared. And he's looking for her, he can't find her anywhere. And it feels almost like one of those dreams where it's like you're running in place and you just can't get to where you're going. It's almost like that kind of weird feel. Like, what do you mean you can't find her? Like, what are you talking about? So it's a little frustrating, but that's the premise of this series, essentially, is he's spending the rest of the series trying to find her. And they had made a pact at the beginning that, they would see each other at the top of the tower kind of thing. So you know that they're going to have to go through the tower. And the weird thing about the tower is it almost seems like time is a little different there. And a lot of time does end up passing in this series. And it is interesting. But like I said, it almost feels like kind of that dream feel, because it's like, this is just, you almost feel like you're stuck. You're stuck in this loop. You're stuck in this place. And the first book, so the reason why I was cautious on whether I liked it or not is because the first book is really going into the negatives of the tower and the dark side of it. I mean, everyone is just almost out to get this Thomas, and he's like, he's getting conned, he's getting tricked into things, he's getting robbed. It's like everyone just seems like a bad person. And I'm just like, I even wrote my review. I'm like, it just seems like everyone is just such a crappy person. It's like, can't he just meet someone with some decent human qualities? Like, it was just irritating. And I was so tired of him getting constantly burned and cons. And he was a teacher. And so I think actually he was like a principal or something of like this small school. And so he's not someone who's more of this hero type quality. So he's not very good at a lot of things. He just is they call him just a man of words, essentially. He just reads. And not that that's bad, but I'm just trying to give you a little bit of a picture of the character. And so he doesn't have very good survival skills for this tower. But, so his main premise is just to try to find his wife again. And so each level of the tower is almost like its own ringdom, its own like little kingdom kind of area. Each one is different. It's ruled differently, different rules, different makeup of it. And it's not like it's hard to explain, but each area is just so different. And I think that's really what made the story cool and unique, is just seeing what was going to be at each level, or what each level might be. There is one level which was kind of interesting, and the whole thing was essentially a play, and they have to like act out this certain type of storyline. But then it's like there's that dark side where if they had like this one rule where they had to light these fires, and if they didn't light these fires, then essentially they get tortured. So it's like, there's always this like real dark side of this tower. They even have, book 3 is called The Hod King. The Hods are actually these people that, have probably fallen into debt or to someone, or, they've just done something wrong, and they essentially become slaves of the tower. And they're stuck in this underground tunnel system that goes through the tower. So you get a lot of dark sides to this tower. There's really not a lot of good to it, unless you happen to have a lot of money and you're the one in charge. But each little ringdom's different, and so it is really unique. And a lot of the ways how they get to the different ringdoms is they have these, they're essentially flying ships. You picture just like a regular ship, but they fly. So that's how they get around. And Senlin will eventually find himself on one of those. And when he becomes essentially captain of one of those, that's when the story does get really good. And he has his crew of people, and he has these other characters. And I will say what the author does really well with the characters and the character development. I think that is a very strong suit of this book. And you really see that starting to develop in book 2. And I think that's why I liked book 2 so much, is because you're not just seeing the bad side of everyone and him constantly getting conned. He finally has allies, and he finally has this crew of people. They each have their faults, but they each have a lot of strengths that they bring to the table. And so you have a lot of good other characters. You have Edith, Anne, Adam, Irene, and Valletta. They're kind of more of the crew people, and they are each really unique. They're very different. They have their own backstories that they'll go through, and they develop so much. Valletta, I think, changes the most, and I don't want to give any spoilers onto that one because that is an interesting change. It's a little dark, but she was a better character in the beginning probably, but at the end she's very different than before. And then you have other characters too. You have the Finks, you have Byron, Marat, Taru. So there's a lot of characters, and you're going to get all that interaction. And the first group of people I listed, you're going to get their point of views because they're some of the main characters. And so, like I said, the point of views will be switching a lot on the later books, which is, it fits because then you get more of that development. Whereas book 1, it's kind of nice just having just that one because it gets you into the story. But there is a lot going on. Where to really place the timeline of this book, it's not exactly, there is technology, but I don't know if I'd really put it like a steampunk kind of, maybe it is a little bit of a steampunk feel. I don't know, because you have these, the technology, these machines and automations, but it also can feel primitive at times. So it's a weird mix of the technology and the basic feel of not having technology. So I don't really know how to describe it, but the automations are a little odd. You don't get that too much until more of the end of the book. So you don't really need to know too much about it, but they're there. There is kind of a scene at the end of book 4 with it, and it was a little odd, a little confusing. Like I said, book 4 had a lot of odd storylines. Not that it didn't work. It just, I don't find it as memorable as I do. Like when I look back on this, the main things that stick out with me is the characters and their development, and just the idea of the ringdoms and how each level, and I honestly, the dark side of each of those ringdoms was a little discouraging, especially in book 1, but then in the other books, I kind of liked it because it was interesting to watch the character overcome that and to finally have those allies. So then the dark part of that didn't seem quite so bad. So yeah, I think, I hope I've maybe convinced you to read these or give them a try. I definitely really enjoyed book 2 and book 3. And like I said, if you go into book 4 with in mind that you may or may not like the ending, it may or may not be what you want. Doesn't mean that's good or bad necessarily. Just go in that with that expectation, and it won't quite seem so stark if you didn't like it. But then also if you did like it, then yeah, you're excited. So I would recommend this. I would enjoy rereading this again. I will say, probably another thing that I think would help make this series enjoyable is if you had a buddy to read this with. I think that would be really fun to have someone to read this series with. Even if I read this again, I'd probably enjoy it more having someone to read with, just because there is a lot of discussion points with this series. And especially where the ending, so many people are divided on whether they liked it or not, it'd be fun to get that other opinion of maybe, a friend or someone just on social media and just be like, hey, what did you think of this? Or what do you think's going to happen with this? Or so just to kind of help predict things, because there are a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of betrayals happening. There's a lot of things to talk about. And I think to have someone to discuss that with would really make this enjoyable. I think this is a great series for that. Just because there is a lot of complex issues going on. And I just think that would make it so much more fun. And so with that in mind, I definitely think you should read it. Especially if you do have someone to maybe read this with, to try it with. I mean, it's 4 books. It's not like Wheel of Time where you have like 14 books. So give it a try. Why not? It's really good. I really enjoyed it. I hope I convinced you to read it. If not, just for the characters alone and just the premise of it, just how unique it is, I definitely think it's definitely worth reading. And like I said, I'd read it again. And if I maybe convince you to try it out, let me know. And hope you enjoy if you do read it.